societies that are helping to poison the planet. So there is in our religious tradition, and not only the Jewish one, but drawn on by Christianity, by Islam, by others, including secular movements of the last several hundred years, an archetypal story of such drug lords, drunk on their own power, addicted to their own power. The word is Pharaoh. And on the night before he was killed, Dr. King echoed that story when he talked about standing on the mountaintop, as Moses did, looking at a land that he might not enter, but that the people must and would. Big coal, big auto, big oil are the pharaohs of our generation, even more than any single government. How do we face those pharaohs of our generation? Well, Moses, at that bush that burned with passion and compassion, heard two ways, two names of God and the universe that made it possible for him to face the Pharaoh. One was the name in Hebrew, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, the future tense. I will be who I will be. The King James translation that says, I am what I am, is what you would expect from a committee appointed by a king. I will be who I will be, and therefore you can be who you will be. The universe becomes. And we must understand that we can unlock the prisons of our own addiction and of the drug lords who addict us. Those prisons are the prisons built by Pharaoh, and we can become. The universe is not imprisoned by those prisons, by those pharaohs. And there was a second name. At the burning bushes, God said, and besides that, I have a nickname. And what's the nickname? In the English letters, the Western letters of the alphabet, it's YHWH. It's not Yahweh, it's not Jehovah, because those letters had no vowels. And I'll pause for a moment and invite you to try to pronounce YHWH with no vowels. It either can or can't be done, depending on what you think pronunciation is. What comes to me, and to many, many people who might ask that question, is what sounds like this. A breathing. Not a Hebrew word, not an Egyptian word, not a Sanskrit word, not a Latin word or a Greek word or an English word or a Chinese word or a Russian word or an Arabic word. In every language of every human community, there's breathing. And it's not only human beings. every life form on this planet breathes. And each form breathes not in a little bubble on its own. It's interbreathing. The Latin word is conspiracy. Breathing together. That's what a conspiracy is. The great conspiracy as one of the names of God. What we breathe in is what the trees have breathed out. And what the trees breathe in is what we breathe out. And that breathing is exactly the interwoven breath of life that is now in danger on our planet. That balance of oxygen and CO2, which comes from what us animals breathe and what our trees, the trees of not our own, but God's trees for us. That interbreathing is what is now utterly in danger. So we need to move at every level of our beings. We need to remind ourselves of that great interbreathing in our religious ceremonies, in our political action, in our educational gatherings. 40 years ago this spring, on the first anniversary of Dr. King's death, we created here in Washington what we call the Freedom Seder. It was the first ever Jewish celebration of Passover that wasn't only Jewish. That celebrated the liberation of Black America, in process then and still in process now, the liberation of other peoples as well. 40 years later, we are in the midst of writing and organizing, more important than the writing, a Freedom Seder for the earth. 40 years later, when we know the deeper danger, 40 years later, when we have a richer sense of gathering the religious traditions and communities and spiritual folk of our planet deeper than we had 40 years ago. So I welcome us all to breathe with consciousness, awareness. Perhaps that one of the 10 instructions at Sinai that says, don't take my name in vain, means try to remember each time you breathe. You're breathing the name of God. You are breathing the breath of life. It is within you and beyond you and around you. The breath. The breath. Breathe it now. Remember to keep breathing it. Remember that we must act in our generation, the first generation